So, thank you so much. Thank you so much, first of all, for coming tonight and taking time out of your for sure very, very busy life. And I know it's a cold evening, but I thought it was truly a significant reading. And I would like now ask Kate, who is our moderator for tonight, to start the discussion. We have mics on not only so you hear better, it's also being recorded. So for the Q&A, we will also ask you to take a microphone. So whenever someone speaks, maybe we'll hold the mic, and please hold it close so it works.
Thank you, Frank. So I just first of all want to thank all of our distinguished guests here for joining us. We have very limited time, but we're going to hear from everybody briefly. Just to introduce the people up here with us, Bianca Bagaturian is a playwright, a writer, and she's also the founder and president of the Armenian Dramatic Arts Alliance. Leslie Ayvazian, as you know, is the writer of tonight's play. Nancy Krikorian is a writer and a social justice activist. Pam Thielman is a PhD student here at CUNY and also a dramaturg and a teacher. And Mike Menendian is the co-founder of the Raven Theater in Chicago and the producing artistic director there. So thank you all for being here. I wanted to just start with Leslie. If you would talk for a couple of minutes about the inspiration for this play.
The inspiration? Can you hear me if I talk like this?
No, we're going to record it, that's why. So a little bit closer. It's also live streamed. Yeah.
Okay. The inspiration for this play?
Yes.
What was it? We moved into my grandmother's house. My husband, my son, and I moved there when our son was 2 years old, which was in 1988. And in the basement of the house, there were the boxes that my grandfather brought back from Turkey. And in those boxes were his diaries and his sermons and the record of his life. And they were written in many different languages, Turkish and French and Armenian and English. And over the period of time that I was there, I largely ignored them. But when it was time to move, which we did just 3 years ago, it took me 2 years to go through the things in the basement. And they were filled with the stories of my relatives, the people who lived in Istanbul and had to leave. My grandfather was a doctor who did have to service the Turkish soldiers. Much of what is in this play is true. I think that every Armenian right now who is in any way artistically inclined is looking to find a way to say the story that we've grown up with. And I have a friend who told me that Armenians only have one story. And it does seem that way. And we all have this story of having suffered this genocide that is referred to as the alleged genocide. And so with the idea that in 2015 we would be at the centennial, I sat down and decided to write a play that dealt with the insanity that happens when a history is denied. And that was really my entire impulse of watching what it did to my family, of living with something that was denied. Something so horrific, something as though the devil were walking the earth. And how do you take something as large as that and make it small enough and big enough to have it be a play? And so the truth is, in my family, my father was hospitalized. He did deal with fighting for his life. And I wanted to find a way to make it feel like a hallucination. I think that's enough. I've said enough. Thank you.
Thank you. So Bianca, we could turn to you. As Leslie said, it seems always important to tell this story, but maybe this is a year where people are especially moved to a certain kind of action about it. Would you tell us what you're thinking about and also what you're hoping for this year?
Right. Well, I think every Armenian sort of has it in their DNA. This genocide, it just emanates in our cells. We can't help it, and it's, you know, the form that it takes as it comes out of us as artists is really, really interesting. We've been holding lots of panels. In fact, here, I think during the No Passport conference, we've had many panels where we talk about how we stage atrocity. When you have something so outside of our realm of comprehension, how do you actually stage it? And, you know, Leslie did it in a very graceful way tonight, a very poetic way. But when something so terrible happens, how do you stop an audience from saying, no, this is not my genocide, it's yours? How do you, involve an audience in stories like this when the rules of society have been broken in such huge atrocity? It's almost, as writers, we need to break the rules of language. We need to go outside and find a new language, like a broken language for a broken world, or just break the rules of grammar and find a new way of expressing these horrific things that are going on around us. And that is sort of the realm that I try to work in and stage. And so for the commemoration, the Armenian Dramatic Arts Alliance, along with Center Theater Group in Los Angeles next month, will be staging a part of Leslie's play, as well as 2 other new plays on the Armenian Genocide.
Thank you. Nancy, would you talk a little bit about, sure. I know you're doing a lot.
I feel like the cuckoo's egg because everybody else here is involved. The cuckoo's egg because everyone here is involved in theater, and I'm actually a novelist. But I have written 3 novels, and I'm working on my 4th, and I'm calling it, my editor's calling it the Armenian Diaspora Quartet. And while the genocide is sort of in each of the books, what I'm really interested in is post-genocide diaspora experience and sort of resiliency of Armenians in the way that they have continuously rebuilt their communities, you know, like birds whose nests have been knocked down, just rebuild again and again. So as a writer, that's what I'm working on. I'm working on the 4th. The first one was a fictionalized account of my grandmother's life as a genocide survivor and immigrant bride. The second was about a woman of my generation growing up under the shadow of this history, and it has a Marxist-Leninist revolutionary with a bomb in it. And then the third one is Armenians in Paris during World War II, and the 4th one is now Armenians in Lebanon in Beirut during the Lebanese Civil War. But I would say that that's so as a writer, but then as an activist, I'm working with a group of Armenians to organize a mass fly-in to Istanbul for April 24th, the centennial commemoration of the genocide, and we're working with Turkish human rights groups. Turkish Civil Society, to coordinate all of this. And to me, I'm doing that as an act of resistance against erasure and denial. So I have this sort of 2-pronged thing that I'm working on.
Pam, you maybe could speak to this in terms of a different generation, and I don't know if that gives you a different point of view or not, but to talk about how you're incorporating this into your work and your thinking.
Well, I think one of the things that's been exciting about working on this play is that it does, to me, and I think to my generation, there is a sense that we do have this genocide history and we do have to find a way to reckon with it, but those family stories, those stories of atrocity, don't always give us a place to sort of define ourselves from. Those are not our stories in the kind of fundamental ways that they are for our parents and our grandparents. And so I think one of the things that I think this play explores very beautifully is what it means to try to deal in a very basic way with other human beings that come into our lives that have Turkish roots or are themselves Turkish nationals, and you have to really learn to deal with people on a human level. And I think that is a really beautiful and important thing to be talking about, especially for the people in my generation who are trying to really, I think, reach across and have some kind of understanding, and also feel comfortable going to Turkey and finding ourselves there. So I think that's a really important thing for us.
One of the things that I have always found so important about this play is how much humor is in it, and I was so happy when everyone was laughing right away tonight. Because it becomes so powerful. But I just think that's one of Leslie's gifts, to make us laugh. so much and draw us into that family so powerfully. Mike, would you talk about what you're doing at your theater and
Certainly.
ways? Yeah.
Yes. Our theater, as a first-generation Armenian-American, I've been aware, of course, of the genocide all my life. My grandparents had escaped the genocide with the march through the desert and settled in Beirut, Lebanon. I've had a theater in Chicago now for over 30 years and thought that in the spring of 2015, what could we do to celebrate Armenian-American artists? And we had several plans. We are currently rehearsing Beast on the Moon by Bridgette Kalinosky. Many of you may be familiar with that play. Of course, it's been done many times all over the world. I just found out from the playwright that it's being published in Turkish for the first time, which I thought was pretty interesting. During this time, we will also celebrate other Armenian-American artists, including Jack Kazarian, who is an artist in Chicago. We'll have her artwork in our lobby, in our theater. And we're very fortunate to have Leslie Ayvazian come to our theater and do a reading of 1515 at the end of May. We're very excited about that. My take on it was, how do we enlighten our predominantly non-Armenian audiences about the Armenian-American experience? That's something that most non-Armenians are not even aware, that there is a genocide, or maybe they've heard of it and didn't even realize it's already been 100 years. So for us, we're hoping that through art, we can enlighten our audiences and just celebrate life in America and the success that we all have.
Thank you. How are we doing, Frank? Do we have
I think we're fine. We have 15 more minutes, so maybe we have a little bit more time. Maybe we can take 2 or 3 questions.
Yeah. Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask anyone up here?
Sorry.
I wanted to ask what the title means.
Here you go, Liz.
Oh. Well, it's 1915 to 2015, but it's also that from the research that I did when I found the order that was issued from Talat, the Secretary of the Interior, that was in September of 1915. So I that's what it was.
It was September 15th, right?
Yeah, it was September 15th, 1915. So, you know, it was a working title for the longest time, and then I forgot.
I think it's a
I have
good
to get a
title.
better answer. It is a good title?
Yeah.
All right. I chose it. You know, I'd like to just say one more thing, which is that this thing about writing about the genocide, and here we are 100 years later, and here we all sit with our Armenian names, our IAN names. It always moves me to hear Armenian names. The real answer to why do we do this is because we just have to. I even to say that seems hard to even say, but it is what Bianca said, and all the books that you have written, and all it's just, we grew up being told quietly from our parents and our grandparents, who were really unable to discuss the details of what they witnessed. It was too much to even discuss. And we inherited the sense that we had to find words. Our generation, my generation, I'm 66 years old, and that's what we were taught. That when you say it was in our DNA, it's as though if we have any artistic inclination, and if we have any way to express it, then eventually an Armenian is going to get around to the genocide. And we know what a tiresome subject it is, even for us. But we have to speak it with some hope that alleged will go away, that the information will show up in history books, that it will become a fact instead of just this awful thing. And you know, in the play I use the phrase, you dined at the table the devil prepared, and I understand how that can take you out. Like, what is that sentence? Really, do we need that sentence? But the truth is, it feels to me that it was, to read anything about the genocide, it's as though the devil was there, that it's truly that. So I wanted to say devil in my play. It just felt like we had to. It's that basic. It's really that basic. We have to just spit it out. Right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's a genocide of memory is what it is. And I think by telling stories, and it's almost like, you know, it brings it back, it keeps it alive, and it keeps the wound open so that we can continue to keep dealing with it. And my way of dealing with it, and my writing, is to think of it in the universality of it. It's not a genocide of Armenians or the Jewish Holocaust. It's a human genocide. It's yours and my genocide. It's all of our genocides. And I really like to think, when I listen to this, it could have been, you know, someone else's grandmother's stories. It's not necessarily an Armenian one. I was recently in Rwanda, and it touched me so much when I read the stories on the walls of the blood running in the rivers and this and that. It was like I was reading my grandmother's stories, and I was standing in Rwanda, and it was exactly the same. So I think it's just really important for everyone to sort of embrace this as their genocide.
Nancy, would you maybe talk for a moment about what you're hoping for in your trip to Istanbul?
This will be my third trip to Turkey in a year. I went in June on one of those Armenian heritage trips where you get on a bus and go around to the places where everybody's families came from. So we went back to the towns, the cities that my grandparents were from, and the towns and villages that other people's families were from. And it was super, super intense, exhausting, powerful. I felt for the first 5 or 6 days, I just felt like a ghost. And then I went back again in September to be part of a feminist workshop, Columbia University feminist workshop called Women Mobilizing Memory. So I was there. Now I'm going back again, and this time I feel like I sort of know the place. It'll be my third visit, so it won't be as traumatic. And I really love the people that I'm working with. And we were probably going to have, it's hard to say, 300 to 500 Armenians flying in from around the world to stand together with the Turkish human rights activists, Kurdish human rights activists, citizens of Turkey who are Kurdish, Turkish, Jewish, Greek, Armenian, you know, in Taksim Square. And the one piece that I'm helping with that, other than the writing and answering emails, is I'm working with a Turkish arts organization to make an Armenian wishing tree. I don't know if you know what the wishing tree is. It's not just an Armenian tradition, it's in other cultures too, but near the churchyards, there are these trees that are thought to be like blessed trees, and people will tie ribbons or strips of cloth on them as prayers. So we have a Turkish sculptor who's making a metal wishing tree that we're going to put in Taksim at the beginning of the ceremony to do kind of an art ritual where all the Armenians who are coming from all over, and I'm thinking I'm going to take, I have some like really ancient frayed apron of my grandmother's, and I'm going to cut a piece of fabric off of that and take that and tie it to the tree. So, and as I said, for me, it's about we're here. We still have a connection to this land, and you know, we're here as witnesses. We're here also to make connections to actually citizens of Turkey who acknowledge what happened and who want to build with us sort of, you know, connection into the future.
Pam, Bianca mentioned working with language and maybe finding new forms of language. I wonder, I know you're working with Leslie on this play, but if there are any projects you're working with other artists that are kind of pushing into new forms or exploring that approach.
Actually, I'm working with the Centennial Committee in Fresno, California, which is where I'm originally from. And most of the work that committee is doing is actually visual arts. That's my mother just opened her first solo show, which is very exciting. But one of the things that the visual artists, I think, are doing is very much like that. It's sort of, I think there's a lot of exploration of space in those commemorations and the sort of ritual of moving through space and the importance of sort of enactment that is not sort of traditional sort of theater, like linguistic theater, but is more of a ritualistic act, so that you are one particular installation is commemorating the march through the desert. So there are hundreds of figures. There's almost 3/4 of a ton of ravens to represent the original, the bodies, the the dead, and that performative movement through space, I think, has been really productive in this commemorative process.
She mentioned space, and I think space is such an important issue here, because I feel through the denial we haven't been given the space to sort of vent our feelings and our wounds, and just Leslie having the space here today, and us, this 100 commemoration is giving us a lot of space to be able to show people. And it's sort of, space is the opposite of the denial, which is sort of throwing everything into a black hole like it didn't exist, but just, I think it's really important. I've been dealing a lot and working a lot with space. Do you find that? Yeah.
So maybe we have one or two questions. Is there someone who, something, this is one, and doing the second question afterwards? No, so we'll start with this one.
Thank you. This is for Leslie.
Oh, hi,
Leslie. Can you give us a little idea of the kind of reaction the theatrical community, the artistic directors, the theaters, how they have reacted to your themes in the plays that you've written?
You mean?
As far as their interest in producing.
You mean
plays,
Leslie's work overall?
Overall, your work overall.
It's not all,
Yes, I know. Yeah.
No. The answer is no. Next.
I actually, I'm sorry, Mitch. I don't mean to just be blowing you off, and I haven't seen you. I'm sorry, Mitch. and then I haven't seen you in such a long time too. But I don't really know how to answer that question. Nine Armenians went all over the place and had a good time, and it's actually going to Fresno now. We're it's going to be running in Fresno. And other than that, I forget what happened. Maybe I don't know. Next.
Do any of you who are parents, or even if you're not parents, do you remember how the history was given to you, or how you gave history onto your children? Something that I've struggled with and I'm expressing and so forth. So I'm curious about what your experience has been.
Can you talk about that?
Would you?
Well,
This is my son, Ivan.
I have anything to say about this really, because I don't remember being told. I mean, I always remember knowing about the events of the genocide. I always remember having the knowledge, but I don't remember whatever the first conversation was when I was told about it. So I'm sorry, I can't help.
We're kind of a washout as a family.
Anybody else on that?
so one more here.
Sam, why don't you say nothing? Sorry. That's my husband.
In answer to that question, one day, my little boy, and one day I came up with a great way of introducing the topic, which is, I worked for Robert Morin for 30 years. His grandfather was the ambassador to the Ottoman Empire during the genocide and was a huge hero of the Armenian people. And I said, let me introduce his history through the eyes of these heroes who gave up so much to try to vindicate the Armenians. And let him see that, A, people are not all bad. In the face of horror, it brings out strong qualities in people. And so that's how we've done it.
This is Peter Kugasian. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
One more? Time for one more?
Well, if we have, maybe you have some closing words from you or something you
Okay. I will just close and say that it's just such an honor for me to have been around this play with Leslie for, I don't know how long, 2 years. And I admire Leslie's overall oeuvre because it's so delicate and...
Why don't you answer Mitchell's question?
Well, I'm answering for me, I guess. It's so delicate and so rhythmic and so smart. And in this particular case, what I think is important about it is that it takes on kind of an impossible topic, as we've been sort of getting at today, and locates it in a place where I think we all have entry points. And just want to thank Leslie for this play, thank the artists and the actors in Austin for this wonderful reading, all of you for being here, and Frank and Siegel Center for having us.
Yes, I want to say that too. I want to say it into the microphone. And I do thank you. I really do thank you. Austin, thank you for agreeing to do this and coming to my house and reading the play through with me. That was just a highlight of my life. Thank you everybody for doing it. Thank you for coming to this. Thank you for giving us the space and time so we just get to say these words and we get to put it out there. Thank you everybody on the panel. I mean it, I mean it. Thank you.
It's on 36 between Madison